Paralyzed woman left alone at Café on first date, then a stranger CEO with a little girl walked up. The rain had just begun to fall when the last chair across from her was pushed back, not to be sat on but abandoned, and the quiet clatter of the café suddenly felt louder than thunder. What hurt most was not the cold drizzle brushing her arms or the ache in her legs she could no longer feel, but the empty space where hope had been sitting only minutes before. Emily Carter remained there in her wheelchair, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes lowered as if staring too long at the table might somehow rewind the moment her first date stood up, muttered an excuse, and walked out without looking back. In that instant, the entire street seemed to move on without her, leaving her alone in a world that had once again reminded her how easy it was to be forgotten. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that change lives, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. Emily had not always been invisible. Before the accident, she had been the kind of woman people noticed when she entered a room, not because she tried to be seen, but because her laughter carried warmth and her eyes held an uncomplicated faith in goodness. Growing up in a small Ohio town, raised in a Christian home where Sunday mornings smelled like coffee and hymnals, she believed life unfolded according to a gentle plan. That belief cracked the night a drunk driver ran a red light, turning her car into twisted metal and her future into a question mark. When she woke up in the hospital, unable to move her legs, faith did not disappear, but it became something heavier, something she had to carry instead of lean on. Rehabilitation taught Emily how to survive, not how to be chosen. She learned patience, endurance, and the strange art of smiling through pity. Friends stayed at first, then gradually faded, busy with marriages, children, and lives that still moved forward. Dating apps became a quiet battlefield of optimism and disappointment. Men praised her courage, her strength, her beauty, but their words often ended before real commitment began. Still, she agreed to this date, telling herself that vulnerability was not weakness, that love could still find her if she remained open. The café had been her idea, a place with wide doors and outdoor seating, a corner of the city that felt alive without being overwhelming. She had arrived early, smoothing her dress, whispering a prayer she had learned as a child. When he showed up late, she brushed it off. When his smile tightened as he noticed the wheelchair, she told herself she was imagining it. And when he left early, citing discomfort and uncertainty, she sat frozen, refusing to cry until he was gone. That was when the rain began, soft but relentless, as if the sky itself was grieving with her. A few tables away, unnoticed by Emily at first, stood a man holding a little girl on his hip. His name was Daniel Walker, and despite being the CEO of a national construction firm, wealth had never insulated him from loss. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier after a brief illness, leaving him with their daughter, Lily, whose small hand was often the only thing grounding him to the present. Daniel wore success like a tailored coat, but beneath it lived a tired heart shaped by responsibility and quiet loneliness. That afternoon, he had promised Lily hot chocolate after school, a small ritual they shared on days when grief felt heavier than usual. Daniel noticed Emily not because she was alone, but because of the way she tried not to be. He saw the careful posture, the chin lifted just enough to signal dignity, the hands clenched to keep emotions from spilling out. Lily noticed too, her childlike awareness unburdened by assumptions. She clutched her stuffed unicorn and leaned into her father, curiosity shining in her eyes. Daniel felt something stir, a recognition of pain that mirrored his own, different in form but familiar in weight. He hesitated, aware of how easily good intentions could feel intrusive. Years of boardrooms and negotiations had taught him how to read situations, but this was not business. This was human. Lily shifted in his arms, and in that small movement, Daniel felt clarity. Compassion did not require permission. He walked toward Emily's table, the sound of footsteps blending with rain and distant traffic, and stopped a respectful distance away. Emily sensed someone nearby and looked up, ready to offer a polite smile and quickly look away, bracing for another awkward moment. Instead, she met the steady gaze of a man who did not flinch or pity, and a little girl whose smile was pure and unguarded. There were no words exchanged that needed to be remembered, only the feeling that for the first time that day, she was seen without judgment. Daniel's presence was calm, grounded, and Lily's warmth seemed to melt the tension Emily had been holding in her shoulders. Time moved differently after that. The rain softened, the streetlights flickered on, and the cafe's hum faded into the background. Emily felt something unfamiliar rise within her, not hope exactly, but relief. She did not need to explain herself, defend her worth, or shrink her pain to make others comfortable. Daniel listened with his eyes, with the slight nods that told her story mattered, and Lily's gentle fascination with Emily's wheelchair carried no fear, only acceptance. Daniel did not see a paralyzed woman left behind. He saw resilience shaped by suffering, a faith tested but intact, and a strength that did not announce itself loudly. He recognized the courage it took to show up, to believe again after disappointment. As a man who had built companies from blueprints and losses into lessons, he understood that broken things were not useless. They were often the most meaningful. Emily, in turn, noticed the tenderness in Daniel's interactions with his daughter, the way his hand rested protectively on Lily's back, the quiet reverence with which he spoke of life without bitterness. She saw a man who had been forced to grow strong in places he never expected, someone who carried grief with responsibility rather than resentment. Their shared silence felt like a conversation deeper than words, a mutual acknowledgement of pain and perseverance. The cafe staff began stacking chairs, signaling the evening's end, but neither felt rushed. Emily realized she was no longer counting the minutes until she could leave unnoticed. Instead, she felt grounded, present, and unexpectedly calm. The city, which had felt so cold earlier, now seemed filled with possibility. The rain had washed the sidewalks clean, reflecting lights like scattered stars. When they finally parted ways, there were no grand promises or dramatic gestures, just a quiet understanding that something meaningful had passed between them. Emily wheeled herself home that night with a lighter heart, surprised by the unfamiliar sensation of gratitude outweighing sorrow. She thanked God for the reminder that connection could arrive unannounced, that kindness often appeared when least expected. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of that afternoon lingered like a gentle echo. Emily returned to her routines with renewed confidence, volunteering at her church, mentoring others newly adjusting to life in wheelchairs, her faith no longer just a belief but a lived practice. Daniel found himself thinking of her during meetings, during bedtime stories with Lily, during moments when life felt too fast or too heavy. He recognized that what he felt was not infatuation but respect, a desire to know more about the woman who had met loneliness with grace. Their paths crossed again, naturally, without coincidence feeling forced. This time, there was familiarity, ease, and a sense of mutual intention. Emily did not feel like a risk to be evaluated, and Daniel did not feel like a savior or solution. They were simply two people walking parallel roads, choosing to slow down and walk together for a while. For Emily, the greatest change was internal. She stopped measuring her worth by who stayed or left. She embraced her story fully, understanding that paralysis had altered her body, not her capacity for love or joy. Daniel's presence reinforced what she had been relearning all along, that she was whole, not in spite of her scars, but because of them. For Daniel, loving again did not erase his past but expanded it. Lily grew fond of Emily quickly, drawn to her gentleness and strength. In Emily, Lily found not a replacement mother, but a friend who understood brokenness without fear. Their bond healed something in Daniel he had not known was still hurting, reminding him that family could be formed through compassion as much as blood. As seasons changed, the cafe remained just another corner of the city, unaware of the lives it had quietly altered. But for Emily, it became a sacred place, where rejection had given way to recognition, where loneliness had been met with humanity. She often reflected on how close she had been to giving up that day, how easily she could have wheeled away before Daniel arrived. The thought humbled her, deepening her faith in timing beyond her understanding. Life did not suddenly turn into a fairy tale for Emily, but something far more meaningful happened instead. It became steady. It became honest. The days that followed were filled with small moments that quietly stitched her heart back together. Daniel never rushed her world or tried to fix what did not need fixing. He learned the rhythm of her days, the times when pain flared unexpectedly, the moments when faith felt strong and the moments when it trembled. He never spoke over her silence, never filled her pauses with forced optimism. He simply stayed, and for Emily, that was something no one had done in a very long time. Daniel's world changed too, though he did not notice it at first. The weight he carried as a single father and a CEO began to feel lighter, not because his responsibilities disappeared, but because he no longer carried them alone in his heart. Lily laughed more freely when Emily was around, her laughter echoing through Daniel's home like a sound he had feared was lost forever. Emily never tried to take Lily's mother's place. Instead, she honored her memory with gentleness, speaking of her with respect and gratitude. That quiet understanding deepened Daniel's trust, showing him that love could grow without erasing what came before. Sunday mornings became something special again. Emily returned to church not as someone seeking answers, but as someone ready to give thanks. Sitting beside Daniel and Lily in the wooden pews, she felt whole in a way she never expected. The hymn sounded different now, not like promises waiting to be fulfilled, but like truths already unfolding. She realized that God had not abandoned her in her suffering, He had walked beside her through it, patiently waiting until her heart was ready to recognize grace in an unexpected form. There were challenges, of course. Public stairs did not disappear. Accessibility issues still existed. Some people whispered, others assumed, and a few openly questioned Daniel's choices. But Daniel never wavered. He did not defend Emily with loud words, he defended her with consistency. With showing up. With choosing her again and again in ways that mattered. And Emily, once afraid of being a burden, learned to accept love without apology. One evening, they returned to the same cafe where everything had begun. The rain did not fall this time. The street was warm with golden light, the air calm and forgiving. Emily paused at the entrance, memories rushing back, her heart tightening for just a moment. Daniel noticed and gently placed his hand on hers, not to reassure her with words, but to remind her she was not alone anymore. They sat at the same table, and Emily realized how much had changed. Not the place, but her. She no longer felt like someone waiting to be chosen. She felt chosen already. As time passed, Emily began speaking publicly about life after loss, faith after disappointment, and love after rejection. Her words reached people far beyond her city, touching hearts that felt unseen and unworthy. She never hid her pain, but she did not let it define her either. Daniel watched with quiet pride as she transformed her suffering into light, knowing that the strongest leaders were not those without scars, but those willing to show them. Years later, Emily would often think back to that first date, the one that ended in silence and tears. She no longer felt anger or shame about it. Instead, she felt gratitude. Because sometimes rejection is not a closing door, but a redirection. Sometimes being left behind is the very thing that positions you to be found by someone who truly sees you. Daniel, standing beside her through every season, understood that success was no longer measured by titles or wealth, but by the peace he felt when he came home. Lily, growing older, carried Emily's strength in her heart, learning early that love was not about perfection, but about presence. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that God's timing is never late and that kindness can change a life in a single moment, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep stories like this alive. Before we end, comment below if you believe that love finds us when we least expect it. Your words may give hope to someone reading quietly in pain. Because sometimes, the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin on the days we feel the most alone.